Hello, this is going to be a very simple guide on how to set up both DS and 3DS emulation on the AYN Thor. So if you've not seen my introductory video about the initial emulator setup, do be sure to check it out. But basically what that consists of is we need to install Obtainium, which is what's going to download those emulators. And then we also need to import a pack from GitHub, from the RJNY emulation pack GitHub, and that basically points Obtainium at all the necessary emulators that we wish to download. So assuming you've done those steps, we're going to go over to Obtainium, wherever I've hidden it. There it is. So this is what your screen will look like. So the ones we're going to get for this video is we're going to get Azahar, which is one of our 3DS emulators. So we're going to install that. We'll just get the vanilla one. Give that a moment. You should see this bot. There it is. Okay, we're going to install that. And then we're going to get Citra MMJ. This is also a 3DS emulator, but some games can work better on one more than the other. So if you try to play something on Azahar and it has graphical glitches or it doesn't work, try it on Citra MMJ and usually one of those will work. If not, then I'm afraid that it's going to go back to old Google and see what you can find on there. And now we're also going to get MelonDS. Now this one, you'll notice, has the dual screen in brackets, which is what we want. So the usual MelonDS, we're just going to get the standard one rather than the nightly one. The usual MelonDS is single screen. So if you've used it on your phone or a single screen device like the Odin, for example, you'll probably have some experience with that. But for this one, we want to take advantage of both screens by default. So there we are, we've got our three apps. So we'll start with MelonDS, a nice simple one. So the first thing it's going to ask you is to set your ROM directory. Where are your games stored on your device, either internally or on your SD card? So mine are just internally, so I'm going to set the ROM directory. And it's already set here, but basically I have a ROMs folder on the root storage, and then I have hundreds of folders in here. This is to do with the emulation station DE front end. It automatically generates every folder in the world for you, but most of these are empty. So because that has to be in a very specific structure, my DS ROMs are in NDS and my 3DS ROMs are in N3DS. Don't know why it's not just 3DS, I didn't build it. So we're going to head into NDS. As you can see, I've got a few games in here. I'm going to use this folder. We're going to allow it. And there we are, it's populated those games already. So this is quite simple. The dual screen one, for the most part, is already set up. So the only thing we're going to change, if I just tap into these three little dots on the top right and hit settings, so you can have a browse through these, but most of them you'll want to leave at the defaults. If you ever change your ROM directory, for example, you can come into the ROM settings, tap your search directory, and then add another one. And for save files, for these I tend to just leave them in the same folder next to the ROM file. If you'd prefer to have them saved to a dedicated storage, for example if you play across multiple devices, untick that and then you can manually select where you'd like to store your save files. So for system, most of these are, we can just leave those as standards. Video, this is where we want to look. So we want to change the renderer from software to OpenGL. This will allow us to take full advantage of the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 that's inside this device. And it's also going to allow us to upscale, so we're going to tap this internal resolution. We're going to pop it on 5 times native, so this will blow up the image 5 times and take full advantage of the lovely 1080p screen that we've got. Filters, you can play around with these. I've not looked too much into these. These are very down to your personal preference, so if you'd want to have it more like an actual DS, then you have these LCD grids. There's one there, the DS Lite Motion Blur. I'm not too sure what the difference is between a lot of these. I tend to just play without a filter. Have a play around, see what works best for you. In here you'll notice there's some dual screen presets. I just leave them on the standard manual layout. It works fine for me. I just make sure that keep DS aspect ratio is still ticked, otherwise you'll find that the image won't quite line up between the top and bottom screens, can look a little bit weird. You can manually set these if you'd like. I'm not going to do that though. For the most part, I don't think it's necessary. And then I don't believe there's anything else. No, there's nothing else in here we need to look at. Audio, you can obviously make sure sound's enabled. There's different microphone sources, so there is a microphone button that will simulate a noise, or you can use the built-in microphone, which is here. So I'm just going to change that to device microphone, and then while using the app, I'm going to go back and input mapping. So this is the big one. So we want to make sure, as you can see here, A is mapped to B, B is mapped to A. Everything's all backwards. So like a lot of these emulators, it's always better to manually do your own key mapping, just so you can be sure that you've set it up correctly. So we're just going to tap through each one of these and then press the relevant button. Now, what's probably easier is if I just clear all these first, because some of these emulators, you can assign more than one button to an input, which can lead to some finicky business if you don't set it up correctly. So we're just going to clear it all and then work our way through. So A is A, B is B, X, Y. We have our D-pad left, right, up, down. If you do make a mistake, you can just cancel it off and give it another try. L, R, start, select. Now you have things like toggle lid, which I'm not going to use. For pause, that'll open the main pause menu. I'm going to use this back button down here. Oop, that will not set it. So I will click the left stick for that. And for fast forward, I like to click the right stick. There's also toggle microphone, which I always put at R2. So if you have a game that has microphone functionality, I've just set that to reset. Toggle microphone R2, there we go. And swap screens I have at L2. For certain games, if you want to swap them. Obviously both these are touchscreen. Again, that's down to personal preference. And then if you want to set save states and load states, you can. I use retro achievements, so I don't tend to use these. So we'll back out of that. And then there's custom controller layouts in there, which I'm not going to touch because, as I said, it's all pretty straightforward. And then for retro achievements, now I'm a big fan of retro achievements. I fully recommend that if you are getting into emulation, this is a must-have. So if you've ever played PlayStation games or Xbox games and got trophies or achievements, this is that, but for classic games. It's got a great community online. It's well worth it. So I'm just going to take this and I'm going to log in. So there we are, I've logged in. I'm going to enable hardcore mode and rich presence. If you use things like Discord, it will show you friends what games you're playing. Go back out of that. I don't use cheats, but you can enable and import cheat codes that are available. There's online databases. That's entirely up to you. So I'm going to back out, go back to the screen. So here's my ROM list. So if I tap this little settings icon, then you can enable per game settings if you'd rather have a bit more granular control rather than having an overall mapping. But as I've logged into Retro Achievements, you'll see here, I haven't played Pokemon Black on this device, so you can see I've not actually done very well. But if you need a quick guide on what the achievements are, you can access it there. So let's boot a game. So as you can see, without changing any of the settings, because it's this specific build of MelonDS, it's already taken advantage of both screens, whereas usually if you've ever used the MelonDS version on a phone, it's split between either half the screen or you have like a little kind of preview down here. We're using a dual screen device, we want to take full advantage of it. So let's just skip through these cutscenes. So there you are, so you can see top and bottom. Cool. So now let's look at 3DS. So firstly, we're going to look at Azahar, which is probably my preferred emulator of choice. I don't have to use Citra MMJ very often. Actually, I can't remember the last time I used it. Azahar has a setup wizard, which we'll talk you through. It's very simple to follow. So we're just going to follow it through, get started. It will ask you for all your permissions. So we'll just make sure to allow all these. And we'll hit next. So this has asked you for two folders. The first one is a data folder. So this is one we're going to create. So I always have these in my root folder. I'm going to tap this little new folder icon and I'm just going to call it Azahar. This is just for the app's data that it stores. I'm going to use that folder and allow it. That's my primary folder. And then applications, that's your ROMs. I don't know why it refers to them as applications rather than games, but again, I didn't build it. So for this one, I'm going to go back to my ROMs folder, scroll all the way down, and I'm looking for N3DS. So obviously you can pick your own folder if you'd rather have a folder called 3DS. Again, I'm bound by the rules of Emulation Station. So again, we'll use that folder, click allow, and hit next. All done, continue. So there's a little pop-up here about encrypted files and .3ds files being no longer supported. So I might need to decrypt them or rename them to CCI. So that might explain why my games aren't showing. So what I'm going to do is go over to files, and then as an example, so the files I have are in 3DS format. So what I'm going to do is find them. So just as an example, for Metal Gear Solid, I'm going to select it, I'm going to rename it, and I'm just going to change that 3DS to CCI. And then I'll do the same for Professor Layton. And then I will go back. We'll go back over to Azahar. And then I'll refresh it. There we go. So now it can see them. So we'll just check if they boot. So it has booted, but it's only on one screen, and it's got this really ugly overlay, which is great if you're on phones, not so great if you've already got a controller. And the screen's hiding all the way up here, which would be our second screen. So I'm going to close out of Azahar, and then we'll go back in. So we're going to tap these three at the top. We're going to work our way through the settings. So the general settings, don't need to touch any of those. System, so by default it's on new 3DS mode. I just leave it. The LLE modules I don't use. That's for a lot of the kind of built-in OS based things. Region I leave on auto select. Most of these I just leave as they are. Doesn't need to know my birthday. So camera, I don't have a camera. Gamepad. So again, I'm gonna work through and set manually. This one doesn't seem to already have a profile installed, which is a bit odd, but it is what it is. So for use the left click for home. So the circle pad, you only need to do up and left, or down and right. So first I'll move it up, and then I'll move it left, and it will automatically calculate the opposite axis for the down or the right, and the same for the C stick or the right stick, and then the D-pad, and then the D-pad buttons you do individually. Not too sure why it splits them out separately. Triggers, so we're going to do L, R, ZL, ZR, L1, R1, L2, R2. Okay, and then graphics. So we're going to leave it on open. It's OpenGL, right? It's OpenGLES. If you notice that your games have graphical glitches, try switching over to Vulkan. Some of them work better than others. It's on a per game basis. A lot of these shaders, I'm going to enable asynchronous shaders, because this can reduce a lot of the stuttering when it's loading in the shaders. Internal resolution, I'm going to bump that up to 5 times, again, to really take advantage of that lovely, beautiful 1080p screen. I'm going to leave the linear filtering on. I won't put a texture filter on. Again, like I covered for the DS section, it's all down to personal preference. Have a play around. You can get into these menus whilst games are open, so you can quickly flick through, see if there's one you like, or if you'd rather just turn them off. There can be a very slight performance hit, but this is a bit of a beast of a device. You're probably not going to notice it. I'm not going to touch the stereoscopic 3D because we only have the single device. I don't want to give myself a headache. And then if you're using custom textures, this is how you do that. So you load them into a specific folder in the Azahar folder. It has to be under a title ID, and then you have to make sure that they're loaded. I don't use custom textures. I think that the upscaling makes the games look cool and modern enough. So for layout, apologies, I just noticed there was something that I'd done incorrectly. So for landscape screen layout, we want single screen, and then for portrait screen layout, we want original. So, and then in this secondary display screen layout, we're going to use the bottom screen, and then that will give us the two screens. And then everything else, performance overlay, you can enable this if you like. I don't tend to use them. And then for the layouts, you can just leave them as they are. So now let's boot into a game. We'll try Professor Layton. And then what I'm going to do, if you swipe in from the left whilst the game is open, I'm going to go into overlay options. I'm going to just disable the controller overlay. And then you also have some extra control from here. So there we go. So you can see top screen and then the bottom screen. So we'll just boot into this, and there you go. I can just use this as I would a normal DS. So I'm quickly going to flip over and demonstrate Citra MMJ. It's very, very similar, but like I said, some games work better than others. So you'll get this little pop-up, so we're just going to allow it. So we're going to add the folder to the library. So Citra does support the 3DS files. We don't have to do the rename, but it also supports the CCI files. So if you have renamed them already, don't worry about it. So we'll find our folder, ROMs and N3DS. Okay. So as you can see, this one's pulled through both the two that I renamed and also the ones I didn't. So let's, so that's for plugins and things like that. We're not going to cover those. So again, we'll come to the top right, tap these three dots, and we will do input binding. So this exact same as we did the last time. So I'll do A, B, X, Y, L, R, ZL, ZR, start, select. I'm not going to use swap screen or settings. You can if you want. That is entirely up to you. Unfortunately for this one, you have to do all four directions of the sticks. It's not clever enough to automatically calculate them. I do believe Azahar is the more maintained emulator, but like I said, it's good to have both just in case. So now that's done, we can swipe back, and then at the top, I just hit that little, it's like a little chip looking icon. So we are going to use the dual core screen layout. We'll do default. I think it does default to dual screen, but we'll have a look. Internal resolution, this one only goes up to 4, so I'll bump it up to 4. Don't want to show FPS. I'm going to enable the hardware shader. And then most of these I'm going to leave on default. I won't enable per game settings, just in time's enabled. Don't need to touch audio output. Again, microphone type, you can use static noise where you can press a button and it will trigger a sound file internally, which it will read as audio input. Or if you'd rather use the real device, you can use the real device. Just make sure to enable the permissions. And then camera type, we don't have a camera, so good luck. So now that's, now let's try Metal Gear Solid. So again, I think if we swipe in, you get this little settings. So where is the setting? So is there? So we're just going to turn the opacity right down for the controller, which is basically the same as hiding it. I'm not going to force any of these. There we go. So I did notice that this game in particular, when I've played it on Azahar, it seems to run a lot slower. So again, have both. If some front ends will allow you to pick specific emulators for specific games. I'll cover that in a front end setup. So I'll just quickly boot into this. And yeah, that's how you do DS and 3DS. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. If this helps you out, I'd appreciate a like. If not, tell me why. So I'll be covering other stuff in the near future. So thanks for watching.